It was a terrible night for poor people, for the middle class, for seniors who rely on Social Security, for our allies in Ukraine, for NATO, for the truth and democracy and decency. And it was a terrible night for everyone who voted against him. And guess what? It was a bad night for everyone who voted for him, too. You just don't realize it yet.
You know what? If I ever cry on TV, it'll be because Maroon 5 put out a new song. But that's it. You big
obscurity. Nobody's going to care anymore. It's like you're seeing it take place with late night television. Nobody gives a fuck about it anymore.
I know.
And it's slowly, you have a bad business model and you're not adapting.
Yeah, the creativity's gone for late night comedy, right? Like that's not really a thing anymore.
Yeah. They think we're stupid. Kimmel thinks he's smarter than everyone, and and it's just, that's exactly what he just said. And to just be full, I guess, transparency. When he was crying, they had just showed him his ratings, and so it wasn't necessarily all about that. Isn't it a little one-sided though? That by the way, I felt so much better with all the things you described. I do suffer from those. You know what cured them? Tuesday night. Tuesday night cured them. They came out with it said like how to cope with a loss.
Yeah.
What about us? What about how to cope with a win?
Yeah.
What about us? They say deep breathing, and they say name your. Have you ever heard name your feeling?
Kimmel and Colbert, they're wrecks because they believe the media, and yet we're fine because we weren't brainwashed. We know the media's job is to lie, to create anxiety out of proportion to the actual threat, or no threat at all. Journalists really only need to give you one tip to manage stress, and that's stop paying attention to journalists. Maybe these late night losers will stop thinking that the world is...
When Joe Rogan and Greg Gutfeld joined forces, Jimmy Kimmel found himself at the center of an intense and unexpected critique. Rogan wasted no time calling out what he described as Hollywood hypocrisy, while Gutfeld carefully picked apart Kimmel's late-night career, examining it piece by piece. The once dominant comedy figure was now being openly challenged, as two of the media's most outspoken voices highlighted what they saw as cracks in the image he had built over the years. The exchange felt less like a casual discussion and more like a deep and detailed breakdown, turning into a moment that seemed far more serious than simple...
Oh, I have a few names to add. CNN, MSNBC, CBS, the town crier. All outlets ignoring Biden's revolving door of gaffes, his constant forgetfulness, weird rambling speeches being let off stage, all the while you told us there's nothing to see.
Jimmy Kimmel once stood out for his spontaneous and reactive style, which made him feel entertaining rather than harmful. In those earlier days, he found humor in almost everything, pushed limits, and carried a carefree attitude that acted like a shield. Over time, though, that edge began to fade. The presentation became more polished, and the jokes started to feel rehearsed instead of natural. Now enter two very different voices from the late-night world, Greg Gutfeld and Joe Rogan. One operates in a relaxed, unfiltered podcast environment, often speaking freely without constraints, while the other mixes humor with sharp commentary.
A real problem with Elon from the beginning of this thing, but it's like he's in this leftist thought bubble. He is in the most leftist thought bubble available, which is Hollywood. And, and I think also, he famously, there's some videos of him in blackface, and those came out, and he had apologized for them, and I think he took that hit and, really doubled down the other direction. I mean, that's just speculation.
Neither Joe Rogan nor Greg Gutfeld seems concerned with fitting into Hollywood's social scene, and that independence gave their criticism a sharper edge. When they both turned their attention to Jimmy Kimmel, it felt less like ordinary commentary and more like a complete unraveling of his public image. Rogan, known for his blunt honesty and sharp eye for what he sees as absurd, didn't hold back. He framed Kimmel as an example of what happens when comedians move away from humor and lean more into moral lectures, describing his shift from a carefree entertainer to a more serious figure as a law.
chance in hell that this is funny when you see those flat, corny, late-night monologue jokes. Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel, Fallon, what they're doing is just like reading off of a teleprompter. There's applause signs, and then there's producers. There's the warm-up guy that's literally telling people to applaud. They're like, okay, explaining to the people, okay, when Jimmy comes out, I want a big round of applause. Let's practice this right now. Ladies and gentlemen, Jimmy Fallon. Yeah. And everybody
practice it.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan painted a picture of someone who once laughed at everything slowly turning into a figure of moral seriousness. And he didn't stop there. He argued that in Jimmy Kimmel's recent material, the humor often feels secondary to applause, raising the question of whether the focus is now more on making statements than making people laugh. He even wondered aloud if Kimmel's political tone comes from genuine belief or from a need to stay relevant. Meanwhile, Greg Gutfeld added his own style to the mix, blending sarcasm with a calm, straight-faced delivery. He poked fun at what he saw as Kimmel's overly emotional tone, comparing it to something closer to a therapy session than a comedy show. Gutfeld also pointed out that late-night monologues, once known for their sharp edge, now often feel more like opinion pieces. The contrast stood out clearly, especially as someone who once hosted the Man Show now speaks about values and behavior in a much more serious way.
In this case, because the poor sportsmanship is coming from TV, normally I would say you can have one lap and smell your flowers, but go ahead and take 4. Because there's nobody going, oh, that's wrong. It's not. You have to be either on Instagram or TikTok to be the outrage. So it's the same thing, and shame on them. Just do your job, Jimmy.
Yeah.
You know, like, I know it's hard to do, but do your job.
Amen.
But keep, you know what? No. Jimmy, keep doing what you're doing, because I love being number one.
Yeah.
At this stage, the moment took on a much sharper tone as Greg Gutfeld and Joe Rogan moved beyond simply commenting on Jimmy Kimmel's recent jokes or style shift and began questioning the image behind it all. Some started to wonder whether his true personality had been hidden beneath a polished appearance and carefully shaped persona, leading many to see him less as a comedian and more as a host who guides conversations and delivers commentary. This combined critique came at a time when late-night television was already struggling, with declining ratings and audiences growing tired of a format that feels predictable. By stepping outside the usual approach, Rogan and Gutfeld highlighted what they viewed as a lack of freshness in the traditional model. Rogan, known for his blunt and unfiltered style, rejected the idea that comedy should follow a political line, arguing instead that comedians should remain bold and unpredictable rather than shaped for approval, while also criticizing Kimmel for becoming overly serious and losing the raw edge of authentic humor.
The killer phrase was at the end when Kimmel said, "You just don't realize it." Because you see, he's smarter than you, and he needs you to know that. And his ego can't bear that there's someone out there more famous and more influential than him. I got news for you, Kimmel. The last time you mattered, Bruce Jenner still had it.
This wasn't some exaggerated claim meant to grab attention. Greg Gutfeld came prepared, almost like a lawyer building a case. Instead of only talking about Jimmy Kimmel's transformation, he showed it. He brought up clips from Kimmel's earlier days, when his comedy felt wild, unpredictable, and genuinely funny. Those moments from the Man Show may not all hold up today, but they carried a clear message. Back then, Kimmel focused on making people laugh, without worrying too much about who might be offended. Then Gutfeld contrasted that with Kimmel's current style, more serious, more controlled, and at times more emotional than humorous. The point wasn't to criticize personal growth, but to highlight just how much had changed over time. The difference spoke for itself, without needing heavy explanation. For many watching, the shift felt noticeable, even striking, and some questioned whether it seemed natural or carefully shaped. Gutfeld leaned into the contrast, framing it in a way that made the moment feel both surprising and, to some, almost ironic.
Right now, they're melting like that stick of butter Joy Behar keeps between her thighs to prevent chafing. Case in point, last night, all the other late-night hosts threw a hissy fit. It's too bad Tim Waltz is still grieving, or he could send them all a sack of industrial-strength tampons. Poor Jimmy. True, it was a terrible night for women. children, and for the hundreds of thousands of hard-working immigrants who cut his...
Even Jimmy Kimmel's most loyal fans began to notice a shift, not just in his comedy, but in his overall presence. And what stood out even more was the silence that followed, coming from Kimmel himself rather than Joe Rogan or Greg Gutfeld. This was the same figure who once responded quickly to critics, yet now there were no sharp comebacks, no witty remarks, and no humor used to deflect the moment. And in a time when public figures are expected to react instantly, that quiet didn't feel strong to everyone. Instead, some viewed it with suspicion, even as a sign of retreat. Online, the reaction spread fast. Memes circulated, fans argued non-stop, and headlines began to speculate, while supporters described his silence as taking the high road, a view that only seemed to fuel more criticism. Comment sections filled up, Reddit threads broke down every angle, and videos of Gutfeld's critique gained millions of views, leaving many to see Kimmel not as someone avoiding conflict, but as a figure who had lost part of what once defined him, while supporters of Rogan and Gutfeld viewed the moment as proof that a new style of comedy was rising, and casual viewers were left questioning whether Kimmel had truly changed or if others had simply said what many had been thinking.